When I saw what ketamine was capable of doing, both at a neurologic and psychologic level, it just clicked for me that, okay, well, we need to use that opportunity. We need to actually help the client to use that recovering neurologic workforce, the ability to actually change the roads of our brain, the neural pathways. That's a real thing. But change it to what?
Welcome back. I'm always excited that you're here. So let's get into this introduction because today's episode is extra special. And if you keep listening, I'll explain why. So I had the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Austin Harris. He is a cardiothoracic anesthesiologist and the founder of NeuroRelief Ketamine and Infusion Therapy in Sherman Oaks, California. And this is one of those conversations where I felt like we entered into a vortex of a disillusion of time and space. Honestly, the whole episode and the whole recording felt really psychedelic to me. It felt like there were synchronicities. It felt like there was a lot of synergistic energy. And it felt like we were just building on each other's energy in a way that just made the episode build higher and higher and higher. We covered so many topics. I mean, Dr. Austin Harris has 17 years of experience in anesthesiology. So he's talking about titrating doses live time as clients are in their ketamine experience. I've never heard of such a thing. Usually it is here's the dose. It's set for infusion therapy, by the way. It's set and it's administered and then it comes down. He's talking about tweaking the medicine as the client's in it. He's talking about doing infusions. You know, the national standard is like 40 to 60 minutes. He's talking about doing 2 to 4 hour infusions, which I have previously only heard of doing for chronic pain or pain management or CRPS, basically anything to do with pain. So he's doing something that I have never heard of with ketamine. Not that I've heard of everything. That's why we have this show. That's why we have this platform. And that's why we have so many amazing guests to share so many different perspectives, because there are so many perspectives. And I'm feeling really energized by all the different perspectives. And this one was no exception to that rule. You know, the model that Dr. Austin Harris shared with us is innovative, it's mindful, it's personalized. And the thing that made it really cool was at the end of the conversation, he invited me to the clinic, which, by the way, I get invited to a lot of clinics. I get invited to a lot of psychedelic ceremonies, and it just so happened that I was going to be traveling to California. So a few days after we recorded this episode, I actually met him in person at NeuroRelief, which is the clinic that he runs in Sherman Oaks, California, which is just north of LA. I learned that with my GPS, and I got to experience this. So there's a whole nother episode that is in the works. At the time of this recording, this just happened about a week ago. So I want to take my time with integration. I want to take my time to land. The lessons, the blessings, the miracles are still very much unfolding. So I want to let that land, and I don't want to make a process episode about how I'm integrating, although I might tell you in hindsight. But something that's important to me is to share the lessons, not the mess. And I'm not that it's a messy process. It's actually really beautiful, the landing from this whole experience. And I want to get my words around, right? One of my favorite words about psychedelic experience is ineffable. Ineffable is a word that means cannot be described with words. And so I'm working to put words to what was a really ineffable experience. But just know that episode is in the making. I want to tell you all about what it's like to have a higher dose ketamine session for 2 hours. It's the first time I've ever heard of anything like this. And then a few days later, I got to experience it. So that is just so freaking cool. And Dr. Austin Harris was just really, really grounded, really wise, drew wisdom from so many different modalities. And I think that's what makes this episode really rich, on top of his really passionate storytelling. And, you know, it takes a lot of guts to speak the truth. It takes a lot of courage to really go to those places, and we need more of that in this world. So I really see him as a leader in the field. I have so much respect for the way that he's doing ketamine differently, and being a stance for that, and knowing that that is what serves his population. And yeah, we'll dive into that in a moment. Really quickly, if you're listening to this episode, the ketamine preparation protocol is live and available for you. It is everything that I have guided clients through in preparing for ketamine since 2021. It's live, it's in the show notes. If you are in ketamine or thinking about ketamine or about to start ketamine, it is there to allow you to dive deeper, right? You're getting a lot of value, a lot of information, a lot of just like knowledge from this show. Imagine what it's like to actually dive in deeper. And that's what this is. It's a really rich offering. It's everything I wish everyone has to prepare mentally, physically, emotionally for your ketamine journey. And it's available now. And so have at it. It's in the show notes. And I'm so excited to share it with you. Equally as excited as I am to share this episode with you. So let's dive into this episode with Dr. Austin Harris. If you're listening to this show, I already know something about you. I know that you care about doing this work well. You're not just here for an experience, you are here for real, lasting change. So let me ask you, how are you ever going to get the transformation you want from ketamine if you aren't clear about what to expect? The only way to make sure that ketamine actually works for you is to get clear on how the mind works and how ketamine interacts with your brain, the rules of psychedelics use so you don't make the same mistake I did, and how to be prepared for anything. And yes, I mean anything. And those questions only get answered when you follow a solid preparation protocol. Unfortunately, most clinics don't offer this up. Maybe they refer you to a therapist, but most therapists don't understand subconscious work or psychedelic work. And with anxiety, ketamine can only do so much. However, I also have good news. That is exactly why I created the ketamine preparation protocol. It is a simple 3-step process to help you feel safe, supported, ready, and yes, able to trust the process so that your journey is powerful and life changing, not left up to chance. Go ahead and visit the link in the show notes and get yourself prepared, whether you've already started ketamine or are going to soon. All right, back to the show. Welcome to Ketamine Connections. I'm so excited you're here.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
All right, as we talk before we hit record, every episode starts with the same question. If you can go back and tell the you before you started all this anything, what would you tell them?
I would tell myself, have faith, that choosing to follow my heart, what felt right, was the right thing to do, and that focusing on healing others heals ourselves. And, it really is doing this work the way that we do it here at this clinic, which is really unique, but doing this from such a personal, um, just sort of human experience really, I think, has made me an even better husband, father, um, calmer, more grateful person during the day. It really helped me appreciate everything that, I get to experience.
Are you suggesting that it's all connected?
No. Yes.
Are you suggesting that, like, right, that we're not these segmented humans that have like work life, personal life, family life, etc., that it's actually all influencing one another?
100%. 100%. In
Say
fact, that's
more.
one of the basic ethoses of the work we do here.
Yeah, say more about that.
It's underpinning, the integrated approach that we have at NeuroRelief that, when we're trying to help someone else heal, we're working with them, as an equal. And it's not the standard, healthcare model of like, is this doctor that comes in for 5 minutes and then like, oh, check some boxes and leaves. But like working the way we do here, where, my relationship with each client, I'm not like their therapist or anything like that, but just a human being with experience, a resource, and I talk with them a lot. I get the opportunity to pre and post integrate with them before and after every ketamine infusion. um, they and I sit together for about an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours, for an intake consult that goes over a lot of things, and it's me listening and then adding some structure, some intent, to sort of refine their relationship with their experience that they're going to have for their first one. Um, and that continues throughout the program, and even afterwards. In fact, every client has my cell phone number in their back pocket 7 days a week as that guide and support system, because it is a powerful process, right? Often decades or lifetimes in the waiting, and that's an incredible amount of emotional processing, of oscillation, and that's something we all experience, right? No day is like one note. No week is like all the same sort of emotional, components and balance. And, for myself personally, I do this work now because of what it helps me to be, what it helps me to do, how it reinforces more positive patterns, and intentions, and sort of relationship between myself and the world around me that I don't think I had a very good basis in prior to, I would say, 8, 9 years ago. And, there was just sort of this um, very fortuitous sort of period of my life where it felt like I need to do this for a lot of different reasons. And then I'm just so grateful that that courage came, and that it felt right, because it hadn't been something that I think I would have done before. Um, but the circumstances created sort of the need for that. And then by working with people this way, it's really helped me to grow and heal from a lot of my own life and what I have been through, starting at a young age. So, as I often say to people, it's more of a sponsor sponsee relationship. It's people collaborating in a shared space where they both are getting a lot out of that, and it has nothing to do with money or finances. It's just human beings.
Yeah, I'm reminded, I think so much of my journey has been finding inspiration through inspirational quotes. So I feel like I'm like this library of inspirational quotes. And there's two that are coming to mind right now. Whatever, the listener's relationship is to God, higher power, etc. But there's a quote, right? It's God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. Right. And so you felt the calling and you stepped into that, right? Like you're saying, that 8, 9 year journey, and that reminds me of the second quote that there's one of my quotes that I live and die by is it's not about the goal, it's about who you become in the process. Right. And so before we hit record, you were talking about how NeuroRelief has like world class service. And I'm looking at everything that you listed as far as what you offer. I mean, even the little bit you've shared just now of like, I'm sorry, an MD sits down with a patient for an hour and a half to 2 hours and has their cell phone number. Like that is a new earth, that is
Not a
that is
thing.
not 3D
Yeah.
reality in the USA 2025. That is above and beyond. So yeah, just like knowing that like that you offer so much in the work that you do, and like that list, I was just like, oh my God, and they do this and they do this and they do this, just like reading everything that you offer. So why don't you tell the listener? Because I think a lot of the listeners that I'm interacting with of this show there's two things that they're really getting from this show. One is um, the variety of the ways to consume ketamine and how to interact with it. And then two, like how to advocate for themselves, right? And so I think any listener could learn a lot from the model that you guys are offering. So why don't you tell us?
Happy to. Thanks so much. So, that was a big You covered a lot of topics in that ask, so I'll try to take them one at a time. Um, the first thing is that when it comes to NeuroRelief's really unique programs, and they are unique, as I've looked around, and it doesn't seem like anybody, and I know why, but it doesn't seem like anybody is including as much methodology, structure, support, guidance, attention to detail, and purposeful intent. And that's because, that takes a lot of investment of overhead and time and emotional bandwidth. And I'll be honest, it's not a super profitable endeavor to offer 10 times um, the substance, which is what we're doing in all of our programs. It's not a very scalable business model. I would say our margins are probably much lower than any other place out there, but it's an absolute joy. Um, and as I started to touch on it, our approach, our very unique approach, really sort of spawned from a lot of the work that I was doing for myself. And then, having been someone who had delivered ketamine to patients for 17 years now. So my advocacy, understanding, and delivering of ketamine was, long before this was sort of, as we discussed, cool.
Yeah.
And so just following that passion coincided with, okay, I need to do a lot of work on myself. How am I going to do that? you know and there's so much information and misinformation, and it's very confusing. So I know what a client out there who's struggling with depression, anxiety, PTSD, chronic pain, even substance and alcohol abuse or something like that, I know that they're getting bombarded with a gazillion different options. Their doctor or initial therapist have their own opinions, and a lot of this is sort of, I think, old think, in terms of sort of this cookie cutter road of what mental health or chronic pain or SA recovery, what's that supposed to look like. You have these sort of establishment complexes around that are very rigid, and you know for me, there was a happy marriage between mindfulness, mindful meditation, mindful CBT, and intentional coaching, therapeutic coaching versus sort of the standard model of psychotherapy, which is sort of the kind of reductionist vent and validate model, which fills out a therapist practice very quickly. But in terms of being able to inject nuance and practical intent for the client to actually invest in their own life functionally, it seems to be lacking. So when I saw what ketamine was capable of doing, both at a neurologic and psychologic level, it just clicked for me that, okay, well, we need to use that opportunity, right? We need to actually help the client to use that recovering, neurologic workforce, right? The ability to actually change the roads of our brain, the neural pathways. That's a real thing. But change it to what? And, what I found, and again, it just married with what I guess I had already explored for myself, was in mindful technique, which includes both meditation, mindful CBT. That's not true CBT. It's all thoughtless, but it's externally focused, sight, sound, taste, touch, smell, tangible right here, right now, one of those stimuli at a time, and then a subconscious, thoughtless, but very open emotional transference between what is we call the heart, the subconscious, the higher self, whatever, and that very narrow focal point, right? And then what you're curating is a subconscious processing state, which is what all of the conditions that I just listed lack, right? The roads of our brain were mostly built when we were young, about 95%.
Before
So
the
by
age
the
of 7.
time, oh yeah, and so the formative patterns resulted in instinctive. patterns in us of, okay, where do I invest the bandwidth of my awareness? Is that being invested in doing, feeling, being, experiencing, sort of open, vulnerable, affectable by our environment, this sort of greater a part of sense of self? Is that feeling better or not so much? Right? Is the bandwidth of our awareness being invested internally in thinking about doing, feeling, being, and experiencing past, future, remembering, regretting, ruminating, catastrophizing, what ifing, but bottom line, an alternative to feeling the reality around us that we don't control, right? And that's an instinctive defense maneuver. But if the formative environment meant that that is sustained, right? Which we're kids, we don't know any different. We're just doing what feels safe, easier, or more comfortable somehow. Then the roads of our brain are going to be reinforced to beget that, right?
It's so infuriating. This is the part of, like, trauma or, like, subconscious formation that for me is just it reminds me of, again, sorry, another one-liner, right? Carl Jung, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life, and you will call it fate." And so it's the function of the subconscious mind. The subconscious mind doesn't have the same hierarchies, it doesn't have the same preferences as our conscious mind. What it cares about is predictability, efficiency, and recognizing patterns. So something happens when we're a kid and we say, okay, this always goes like that, right? Because we generalize in the subconscious mind so that it's repeatable, so that it's efficient, so that it's recognizable. And then we repeat it over and over, and people get into these loops, right? And then don't even get me started on talk therapy, because talk therapy is just digging those grooves in deeper, right? How many
Right. It's
times
just
are you
like
going to
going over the same territory.
Exactly. It's just like, oh, and again, and then it happened in this relationship, and then it happened in this relationship, and now my boss is my mother, and my partner is my uncle, and like all of this stuff. And it's just until you know how to interrupt those patterns. And ketamine is an incredible tool. I love how you said that before. I think before we recorded, it's a tool, but if you don't know how to work with a tool, what good is it, right?
Absolutely.
It's just not
And
it.
and that work, right? We need to be intentional as providers, as the therapeutic side of the process. That's a client or a patient comes to us looking for some structure, looking for okay, what should I do? And if we're not actually providing that, which unfortunately I would say 90 to 95% of the field, especially in the sort of clinical model, isn't doing that. It's sort of what we call the drive-through operation, right? Here's a little ketamine, mostly underly short duration infusions, underdosed, set it and forget it by weight, hit the start button, walk away, come back, great job, see ya, have a nice life, good luck, next, right? And that's a profitable business model, but it's not offering people okay, now what? Because that part's hard, right? It's going to be unique. It's going to be individualized to the person. The model has to be completely in support and intent about, okay, what are we going to help this person do with the neurologic and psychologic shift that properly done ketamine infusion therapy can engender, right? And so the way I describe it, and people that maybe find me in other appearances elsewhere will recognize this metaphor, because I use it all the time. Let's say we get the neurologic road workers back, the neuroplasticity that, because of the stress response of our neurohormonal struggle, was actually turned off at a receptor level in the brain. So the ketamine done properly will bring that back. Okay, that's a given, done properly. But what new directions are you going to give those workers, right? Because the trucks of asphalt, they're ready to be sent somewhere. Everyone's getting paid, everyone's got their Mountain Dew. But how are you going to, as the client, as the patient, direct them, i.e., invest the bandwidth of our awareness? Because sort of where we focus, we will feel, right? That's the intent. How do we direct those workers to reinforce different roads than the only instructions we've ever known how to give? right? And so if as the provider, as the caregiver, as the one they're coming to try to get assistance, if we don't create that intent, if we don't create the simplicity and the structure and the support so that they can do that for themselves, then you're not actually building something new, right? You may feel a temporary sort of psychological relief, but that's going to be sort of like give them a fish, feed them for a day. It's not going to be something that they're going to develop as a new personal, both neurologic, psychologic, personality, decreased defense mechanisms and intentional sort of behavioral or investment approach that's actually going to pay off sustainable dividends for themselves in real life. That's what we do, though. So, all of our programs, whether they're for mood, pain, or essay recovery, are all mindful and integrated. In other words, every single client is trained, guided, and supported in a very specific and customized guided mindfulness meditation program, a mindful CBT exercise program, and certified integration and recovery coaching with one of our professionals over Zoom. And all of these folks we're talking really high functioning professionals with not just a coaching certificate from somewhere, but subspecialty interest and official certification in, let's say, internal family systems, parts work, somatosensory experiencing modality, applied mindfulness, male and female, right? Because that matters for a lot of folks, and that's okay. And then this is okay, I'm investing that shift that the ketamine's offering me as an opportunity into new practical functional patterns in sort of the relationship between myself and the world around me. And it's in that relationship that those three categories of conditions are struggling, right? And to be able to build that bridge, to build that sense of inherent faith and trust and reward and now new positive feedback cycle with our sensory immediate environment, not our thoughts, but just what's real, what's here, um, was actually the way human beings were always supposed to operate and always used to operate until very recently in our history. So mindful technique really is just, you know, a scientific way of capturing how our brain is actually meant to function and how we can rebuild that for ourselves.
It's so funny. It reminds me, so my background is hypnotherapy, and it reminds me of this really funny joke that we have, like, it's our little joke inside the field that we have clients that, a lot like ketamine, hypnosis is kind of like, it's not people's first line of action, right? If someone's feeling a certain way, like people come to us, whether it's, ketamine, hypnosis, subconscious reprogramming, it's like they've tried all the normal muggle things and then they end up in our offices, right? And so the joke with hypnotherapists is, people come to us and they know exactly why they are the way they are, and they could sit there, right? And I used to have more patience for this, but like like as we're talking here, it's like there is harm every time you repeat a story, but you let someone just like kind of talk, right? And you're just like, and then this happened, and my childhood, and my parents, and my ancestral line, and this, and this, and this. And then you just let them go through all that. And then you go, okay, and how do you want to feel? And then you just watch
Right.
their brain haywire of like, whoa, no one's ever asked me that. Right? Of just like, here's the highway of like least common resistance, right? Every day at 9 o'clock, I sit in traffic and I get upset. Every day at 3 p.m., I hate my job and I want to quit. And it's like we get the chemical impulses from those stressful thoughts, right? And it's like we're on this highway, right? We're just like, it's from the moment we wake up, it's like a downhill slope. We're just like
And we've
downhill
been
skiing.
trained this way by modern
Totally.
culture. We've got
Absolutely.
about 5 or 6 generations of parents, children raised increasingly by children. So we don't really we from birth nowadays we're getting many ways the opposite of what all human children used to get, like forever for a million years. And the animals we evolved from are still doing it, right? And then what we're doing now is this. It's almost like it's intentional, like this sort of from every direction this limbic system motivated sort of stress response, right? And what does that do? It at an instinctive level, it makes us all feel like we do have to withdraw our bandwidth, right? And that's why things like social media and cell phones become so addictive, because it's like, well, this is just easier. This feels safer. I'm in control of what I get to feel here. And that's an extremely dangerous pattern to reinforce, because we are not in control. We don't actually even control our own thoughts, even though it seems that way, right? We're not supposed to think that we control the world around us. We're not supposed to think we want to. It's supposed to be wondrously uncontrollable. And the humility of realizing I'm just another ant on the boulder hurtling through space at 67,000 miles an hour. I don't need to obsess about how much control I have over everything, but it's my relationship with the, oh, okay, so I'm small, right? I'm not here to be like super matter or be like so significant or have all this stuff or titles or, cars or whatever. That's not why I'm here. I'm just here, and I'm here for a short time, hopefully a good time, but not a long time.
Right.
And it's actually our smallness. That's why humility is so important. It's our
Yeah.
acceptance of the proportion that this is supposed to be small and insignificant, and all this, is our resource. This is our sense of self. This is our sense of being alive, of what our life is. And it's, these aren't my numbers, but I repeat them often. 99.9% of the sight, sound, taste, touch, and smell stimuli of our external environment, our personal sensory environment, on a daily basis, millions of potential little pings and focal points, ranges from pretty great to, at worst, not an actual tangible threat to us. But what this stress response mediated sort of defense wall that ends up getting unfortunately reinforced both neurologically and behaviorally is, well, I need to filter this out, right? I need distance from this because of the potential theoretical 0.01, right? And what ends up happening? We lose the 99.9.
Okay, I hear what you're saying. So you're saying that our control issues, right? We all have them. And so our control issues are controlling our environment because we're all afraid of something. And again, that goes back to childhood, it goes back to conditioning, right? There's something that we experienced that we said, okay, that's not safe. And so I'm going to control 99% of my environment to never experience that 0.1%. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and we don't even know what we're afraid of. It's just a neurologic model that was ingrained, which is in here, I'm safe because I have this delusion of control. And then, but this was never supposed to be normalized. Then we go out in adult life and we think that that applies to the real world. And when it clearly does not, we're beside ourselves and we retreat even more in here. And so, depression, anxiety, OCD, disproportionate chronic pain based on central sensitization and somatic escalation, uh, substance and alcohol abuse as an attempt to, again, cope internally without external equilibration or sublimation. Those patterns are an inevitable consequence of that really binary divide of these roads are over reinforced. And these ones, this sort of inherent faith that our environment is 99.9% safe, right, is not what's playing out for us instinctively. And so these situations or presentations that we're seeing are kind of inevitable consequences of a model that was never going to work.
Yeah, it's so interesting too because when you think about it, right? Um, we're something happened that surprised us, that blindsided us, and we're trying to control not getting blindsided again, but that's the whole definition of blindsided, right? It's like if something, something happened and like, okay, I'm going to make sure that I know every single answer and I know everyone knows that I know the answer so that I'm super smart so that I never get caught, being asked a question by the teacher and not knowing the answer. It's like, well, guess what? Like, good job following that pursuit. but the next time you get blindsided, it's going to be something totally different that is completely, because that's the definition of blindsided. And I resonate a lot with what you're saying, because my specialization is working with anxious people. And a lot of people don't understand anxiety, but my hypnotherapy background really allows me to understand the repetitive function of anxiety in a different way. And the number one way that anxiety works is that it's a overactive question response. What if, what if, what if, what if, what if, right? And so what I teach clients is to add the word so in front of that, right? So you can actually answer the question, right? What if I'm watching cars go by? What if I get into a car accident? What if the sky falls down? What if there's a tornado? What if, right? You add the word so in front of it, right? So what if something bad happens, right? So what if the sky falls down? Well, then I'll be really surprised and I'll wonder what to do next. You actually can answer the question. So what if, I don't know the answer and someone thinks that I'm unintelligent, right? It's like, well, that would suck, right? It's just, then you actually have a question you can answer, and then you can actually connect with what we're so afraid of, which is feeling an uncomfortable emotion.
Right. But the truth is, if we don't embrace the opportunity to feel an uncomfortable emotion, an effect, or something that hurts our feelings or makes us feel insecure or what have you, if we're not willing to allow for that opportunity to occur, then you don't get all the rest of the good stuff, right? Because you can't think joy, right? So, by this overly developed ego defense structure, which is where all of our thoughts come from, right? It's a self fulfilling mechanism now that was over reinforced. It's just coming up with the now potential threat response to sustain a pattern that was unfortunately grooved, even neurologically. So, with that sort of internal isolation or echo chamber, obviously anxiety is going to be inevitable. But, when it comes to the other side, which is depression, this is why they so go together,
Two
right?
sides of the same coin.
Always.
Yeah.
Is, if we're in here sort of hiding from feeling out here, then, like I said, you can't think joy, right? What is joy? It is a instinctive, inherently uncontrolled, unpredictable, often surprising moment of emotional subconscious transference between that, processing system, right? That bigger sense of self, and something outside of us, some situation, stimuli, circumstance, or moment where it feels like, cool. Why does it feel that way? Because we feel small, we feel fortunate, we feel like something about the world reached out and touched us in a way that we didn't expect. If this wall of internal echo avoidance thing is our norm, we can't get any of that, which
Right.
is inherently depressing.
Yeah. Yeah, it reminds me of it's Dr. Brené Brown's work, right? When she started off talking about vulnerability, the place that she got to was that we don't get to cherry pick our emotions, right? I'm only going to feel happy, good vibes only, etc. But I don't want the disappointment, the grief, the shame, the sorrow. Like, I don't want that. I just want this. Well, you don't get to pick it. And what we know from, indigenous shamanic traditions is the deeper that you're willing to go, the higher, right? It's like, it's a universal law, as above, so below. So the more you dig in, the deeper you go, the higher you go. So if you want a state of elation, joy, ecstasy, right? Not from substances, but just from life, from looking at the trees budding and going, holy shit, life is all around me. You have to be willing to go into the depths of sorrow, of grief, of pain, and you can't do that. And then, and her work, Dr. Brené Brown's work, where last time I checked in, is talking about how, they've done research that the hardest emotion for people to feel is joy, because joy there is no other way to feel joy other than presence. It's
right.
just
And you have to, when you feel joy, because it is such a this way, there's always a balance, right? The joy comes with something else. Right? If you've ever felt real joy, like why do you cry sometimes? Why do you feel a tear leak out when you see a beautiful sunset? Because it's going so straight in, right? That that's going to push something else out too, right? So you're getting sort of a both sides. It's a complex thing. And this is why, like I said, if we are unfortunate enough to have this overly reinforced, internally fixated defense structure, we're not going to get either, because the poignancy, the depth of which joy needs to occur to really resonate is going to be associated with other really deep feelings, often not even from the present, but suppressed emotional conflict from the past, right? And that's what a subconscious processing moment is. It's a two-way street, right? There's a receiving and there's also a releasing, right? There's an equilibration that it's occurring in that moment. Like looking at a picture of my family, everybody else looks at that and they go, "Aw." But for me, it's so much more complex, right? I feel the love, the joy, the fear, the insecurity, the transference going back to what never can be fully resolved emotional conflict from my messed up childhood. And, all that is sort of moving in that uncontrolled experience of feeling. And this is why I work with a client and I say, listen, we don't control what we feel, okay? But we do have power. And this is such an important point. We have the power most of the time to invest in the stimuli or the direction that we will feel with, right? So, you know, uh, our bandwidth, which evolutionarily we have an intentionally limited bandwidth to our awareness, so that where it's invested, there's opportunity cost, right? There's now intent to our awareness, and that's very important. Um, well, we just need to use that intent wisely. So let's say we feel like, we're in a store and someone says something that's hurtful to us. Okay, well, we now have three choices. Are we going to sit there, become myopic on that? And every 100% of our bandwidth is now ruminating and resentful and upset about that? Okay, now that's all you're feeling. Super. Or the other sort of more immature coping strategy, which is, well, I'm just out. I'm not even here anymore. I'm like disassociating. I'm off in some other thinking reality, so I'm not feeling what this is. Well, you also have no more bandwidth now available to invest in the other 99.9% of the present that would feel better. Great. So the more emotionally mature and intentional way is, it's okay to feel for a second. You don't even have to have a conversation with yourself about it. Just be like, oh, and then shift, right? Stay present, but shift the focus, into some other sight, sound, taste, touch, or smell focal point. And now fully feel that. And what happens? That new thing, it just pushes the last thing through, right? And that's our power to choose where we're going to feel with. And if we don't choose with intent to be out here, what's going to happen for too many of us is the old default of unfortunate reinforcement is going to pull that bandwidth in here, right? So that's what our program's about, building that external faithful intent of feeling.
right. Because the feeling is exactly what I want to talk about is that, if we talk about emotions is energy in motion, right? And what most people don't know is that emotions only have a life cycle in the body of 60 to 90 seconds. Exactly. And so what you're talking about is if something happens, right? Someone says something and it triggers, right? It activates. I like the word activate more than trigger because triggers
Yeah,
used
me too.
in the
I don't
wrong
like the
way.
trigger word.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's just used wrong. Most people don't know what it is, but they're
I
using
agree.
it every other
All
sentence.
the time. Yeah.
So someone says something and it activates something inside of me, right? And if I go myopic, as you were saying about that, then what I'm doing is something that's only supposed to be a point of information, right? And that information could be like, oh, I still am carrying around this old story. Oh, that wound is still open and someone just poked it and it hurts, you know? But now when I go myopic, I'm recreating it, right? So instead of just letting it pass through, now it's like it's going on
Now
for
it's your
hours and
whole
days.
existence.
Exactly. And same thing if I disassociate and I shoot out of it, you know, and that's like a lot of like our ADD, ADHD patterning is like, okay, this
Yes.
isn't safe to feel, so I'm going to shoot somewhere else. I'm going to
I'm
go
off
over there.
somewhere else.
Exactly. And then it's
Yeah, I
like then
haven't
you're
met a child with ADHD that didn't have a messed up formative family structure.
yeah, absolutely.
I don't think it exists.
Yeah, I've been
It's
diagnosed
an
just before
adaptive
school.
mechanism.
Yeah, it's an adaptive mechanism for sure for things that we're not taught to do, which is how to feel difficult emotions. Well,
Yeah.
guess what? You shoot out, what happens? The body says, "Oh, you're busy. Let me hold on to that for you." Now we have
Hmm.
people with chronic pain. Now we have all of these other disorders because we're shooting out. Whereas what you're saying is like, okay, let this come up and then go, let me zoom out, which is also the physiological response to regulation, right? When we get stressed, when we get anxious, we zoom in. What are we doing with these devices other than like zooming in, right? That's the physiological response of stress. The body doesn't know the difference, you know? It's just like, oh, everything's zoomed in, now I'm stressed. We let something come up and we say, oh, wow, that was really uncomfortable. That person said something and it really hurt my feelings. I'm going to feel that. And then, like, oh, look, there's something else over there. I love what you're saying. In my lineage, where I've trained, what you're talking about with, it's called five senses reality, right? So it's like focusing on the five senses. And it's just like, and what a great presencing technique, right? And then you're just like, okay, now I felt it and now I can move on with my day rather than like, I don't know how I feel about this. So I'm going to put it in a suitcase. I'm going to go home and I'm going to cancel all my plans and like sit here and like really dig in on this rather than going, oh, that was really uncomfortable and it sucked. Ouch. Okay, what else is in there in the world?
The Buddhist had a great saying for this. They said we should be like an open box in a field, right? And sometimes sunshine and cherry blossoms fall into that box, and that's lovely. And sometimes it's rain and mud and ants and dead leaves, right? But no matter what, the last thing we want to do is shut the lid. Because if we do that, we've really harmed ourselves in two ways. Number one, um, now that's going to stay in the box, right? There's nowhere for that to go. And number two, we have cut ourselves off from any fresh flow, right? Anything that would come next, anything that would blow that through and replace it with something new. But even that for me is too passive because, like I said, our intent really gives us the power to choose where we focus. And, we can direct that. That's our superpower. It's not just all here or I'm out. I'm not even in the real anymore. There's a 99.9% other more substance based, better feeling, emotional resonance to be had with all these other stimulated focal points that I can get right now,
Yeah.
but from over here. And,
Yeah.
wash it through and you're back.
Yeah. And it's literally a law in the brain, Hebb's law, where attention goes, energy flows. You want to set your attention towards
I love that.
misery, towards how that jerk like cut you off in traffic, like go right ahead. Or like you're saying, just let it flow, let it pass through. What do you want to feel? And it really, I've known this for over a decade at this point, but putting it into practice and just saying like, yeah, that over there really sucks and that over there is really painful. But I'm going to focus on this other thing, and what we know is that what we focus on grows because we have mechanisms in the brain. We think 70,000 thoughts a day. We receive over 1 million pieces of input a day from our external environment with technology and things like that. Your brain is not focusing on everything. Your brain is focusing on that which you deem important. If you deem your depression, your, poor thinking, your childhood trauma, if you say that's what's important, your brain's going to go, I got you, boo. Here you go. Here's more of that. Here's a terrible boss. Here's a shitty, gas station attendant. Here's like all of this. You set your attention to, I'm just going to go out there and see how much smiling I can do today. And all of a sudden, the world's smiling back at you, and it feels like a miracle, but it's the mechanisms in the brain that are here to, your brain is never going to make you a liar. Your brain is always here to make you honest and you say, the world sucks. The brain goes, "Hey, go watch the news. It sure does." You say the world is beautiful and you go do some charity work, or you go to a park and you watch this is my favorite. I'm outing myself. I love watching dogs run around at the park. I just like hang out there. I don't have a dog yet, but I just love watching them run around. And it's just like, it's so happy to watch these dogs run around, you know?
Yeah, when I was a kid, it was just I used to sit and watch the ocean, right? I lived in San Diego, and so I'd hang out, it was sort of my safe place, and just sitting in front of that expanse was humbling, and it also put things in proportion of, yeah, I've got all these things that I'm feeling that are really challenging and hurtful, but there's more beyond this, and that gave me hope and inspiration. And watching the surfers catch waves, and people walk with their families, knowing that just because my personal formative environment and a lot of that, which is very, we imprint on our parents, right? We can't get away from that, so that's gonna go in, but that there's more but that, right? The life and what life has to offer us is far more than that which causes us trauma or grief. And keeping that appropriate level of proportion allows us not to become just all about that. And so, when we use ketamine, this is what the opportunity is, because, and this is why, I only believe in deep ketamine infusions, which is intentionally creating that state of ego disillusionment versus oral, nasal, or intramuscular that don't have a neurologic evidence-based backing. The peak receptor saturation is actually very short, right? You feel something for a while, but it's only the peak that our brain deems as the legitimate duration, right? So our resistant neuropsyche is designed to shrug off new stimuli and signals and patterns as outliers. So if you really want to shift paradigm, we're going to have to overcome that resistance. And so that's why only infusions are the gold standard for actually inducing infrastructure change. You can potentially, in someone who's very highly trained and knows the client really well, utilize oral or intramuscular by timing the neurologic experience of the client with intentional therapeutic communication, right? But that's a purely sort of psychotherapy plus model. It's not going to induce neurologic change. It's not going to recover the neurologic road workers that can actually change the infrastructure to beget new instinct, because the duration of the peak is too short. It's only a few minutes. Whereas with an infusion, whether it's an hour, 2 hours, or 4 hours, for some central sensitization, chronic pain, or SA recovery programs, you're giving a loading dose, you're getting right up to that intentional ego disillusionment peak, and then constantly redelivering it to sustain it the entire time. That's a beyond exponentially different, what's called veracity in neuroscience talk,
Yeah.
likelihood that that person's brain is going to go, oh, you're serious. You actually
Yeah.
want me to do something about this.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm
Yeah.
on board. Right.
Yeah.
And so now we've got that opportunity. Great. But my goal in my career, in what we're doing, is to hopefully nudge the field in the direction of what's really best for people. And also that we need to do more than just give ketamine. And, all the things that we're discussing right now are so, wonderful, but, you know, patients or clients, they need to feel that. And, it can't just be theoretical to them. I mean, we can talk with, our clients about these concepts, but at the end of the day, that doesn't beget change, right? They have to be able to apply this in some sort of tangible, personal, functional way to build new patterns. So, that's one of my goals, I guess you would say.
Yeah, I like what you were saying. I've had someone who's personally experienced a high dose ketamine infusion that has that, like you overcome the threshold of the guardian of the mind and you sustain it. The way that I experience it is, when you're a little kid or, or an adult, doesn't matter, you spin in circles, right? You spin, spin, spin in circles. And then it's like the ketamine spins you in circles. Then you come out and you're like, wait, which way's up, which way's down, right? Now your life isn't making sense anymore. Now you're going, wait, why would I eat McDonald's? Wait, why would I call my ex? Like, wait, does that make sense? Right? It gives you enough of that disorientation that you actually start thinking about the actions that you were doing on automatic. And then with the right guidance, like you guys are supporting with the coaches, with the CBT, with the all the other support, the things that we touched on in this episode, where people are guided to make different choices, right? To actually think about what they're doing, then that's where the transformation happens.
Yeah, wonderfully said. And, I'll take it a step further in terms of what is ego disillusionment. That's a really important thing that can only be accomplished with a carefully adjusted ketamine infusion, right? There's no other psychedelic compound that is able to achieve ego disillusionment and sustain it. 5-MeO-DMT can have a moment of ego disillusionment, but not sustain it. And so, what is that, and why is that so important? What is ego disillusionment? It basically means you're now outside the range of your own defense mechanisms to bother you, right? So, you actually cannot have a bad trip. Okay. And that's so important for people to understand that this is different. This isn't just another psychedelic when delivered in this way. And like what we do, we're adjusting the infusion moment by moment in real time during the actual infusion to neuropsychologic parameters. And those adjustments are felt by the client or the patient instantly because the half-life of ketamine IV is only seconds versus hours for other delivery mechanisms or other psychedelics. So you have this incredible precision to be able to actually customize the experience for a unique person, right? With unique neurology, psychology, personality, defense mechanisms, metabolic tolerance levels, right? These are diverse in the population. You can do that in real time if someone knows what they're doing. But what's the point of that? The point of that is when we turn the ego off, this is the thinking, trying to control, defend, separate, buffer thing that we're so used to. What's left? Well, it's our subconscious. This is our best friend. It's a highly, infinitely wise supercomputer. It's a processing system that is so many orders of magnitude more intuitive and complex than our thinking thing. But we didn't reinforce the roads to trust and utilize and allow that because it's a vulnerable experience that we don't control. Okay. But it has two vital jobs. Number one, emotional guidance, right? It
Intuition.
knows, right?
Yeah.
It knows what is good for us and it's
Yeah.
never wrong. So it crunches all the data from the present, the past, on top of this sort of incredible code that we were born with, whether that's a billion years of evolution or sort of divine gift or somewhere in the middle, who knows? But we know that it's pretty perfect. Um, Given the opportunity, it crunches all those numbers and then generates an intentional feeling. And that feeling is designed to nudge or align us, right? If we will listen, allow, and go with that. And its other job is suppressed emotional conflict resolution, right? It's what all the older cultures before our very internally isolated, insecure model that we're operating on, they used to work together to let things out, right? To click over from, ego, defense, survive, suppress, override, right? To, okay, it's safe just to let that temporarily suppressed emotional conflict be going where it needs to go. And they would go through regimented behaviors all together in the open to allow that to take place, so that that suppressed emotional conflict never built up, right? And they had way more trauma back, let's say 5,000 years ago, than we actually do on average today. But they
Well,
were able to
capital T,
de-escalate all that because they trusted that subconscious processing
right,
to do that for them, meaning they allowed themselves to feel through it and
right,
made it very brief, actually.
right,
In ego disillusionment, ketamine infusion, that's able to happen on our behalf, finally, in
right,
a very efficient way
and safe way.
and very safe. And it's actually quite gentle as an experience. It's
Oh,
not traumatic, or it's not going to like throw trauma in our face. Like, our subconscious is way too wise for that. That doesn't happen with a deep ketamine infusion. Instead, it's like, you know, the weight is just sort of like it just sort of goes out the back door in this abstract tangential experience. And we don't even realize what or why things are processing, but we then emerge from that. And that glass of unprocessed emotional conflict has been drained a bit. And so, for these reasons, both neurologically and psychologically, that's why a ego disillusionment ketamine infusion with appropriate duration, not this little 40-minute rinky-dink thing, is really important if your goal is to actually really help someone.
amen. We're gonna wrap this up, and I'm gonna do something a little different right now. I'm going to, because I want to for the person listening and has heard us literally traveling between 8 different dimensions in this conversation, as I love to do, and obviously you
Me
do too.
too.
Thank you for meeting me in that space. But to synthesize, I'm going to summarize what makes your process different, and we're not going to get into the details of it. We're just going to say like bullet points, right? Like the sort of like the top of the outline. And then if I'm missing something, you fill me in. Okay. Okay. So it starts with a long 1.5 to 2 hour consultation with you where a client can actually have their questions answered. You're explaining the process, and what you might know that you're doing and they don't know what you're doing is that you're actually priming them that this is different, that something is going to change, because we need that. We need that, like, hey, this is going to be different. So you're priming them for this is going to be different with a nice long consultation where you're not a doctor, you're more of a mentor, sponsor, you're a peer, right?
Yeah, and we're also onboarding the mindful meditation and mindful CBT part of the program that they're going to be doing on their own.
Okay, perfect. So they have the onboarding and the resourcing to help them handle whatever comes up and then they come in for their infusion. It's anywhere from 1 to 3 or 4 hours, I believe you said, depending on what they're coming in for.
Yes, we
So
have 12 different ketamine infusion protocols depending on patient factors, conditions, things like that, all evidence-based.
cool. So they're going through the process where they're actually, and then the thing that I've never heard before is that you're titrating the medicine as they're in it, which I think is
That's
so
correct.
cool. I might have to
Yes.
book a trip out to California to come see you.
Come on down.
So then they have that nice long infusion where they have a sustained experience of ego
Mhm.
death rather than some
Not ego death. I think that's a little bit disconcerting for people. It's not ego death. It's simply that sort of tension, right? That demand within us just sort of melts away. And what we're left with is just this incredibly open sort of being a small part of something connected and vast and nurturing and comforting, which is what a pure subconscious state feels like.
Got it. So it's turning the default mode network off for a
Yeah,
little bit of time. Yeah. Okay.
exactly.
Cool. So they have that experience. Then they're like, whoa, which way's up, which way's down? What do I want to do? And then they have support in the aftercare to help them make different choices, to help them, right, to build new roads so that they get off the highway that they've been driving on their whole lives and they start walking down a footpath. And then that becomes the highway. The more that they travel that, the old highway goes away. Now they have a new highway and they're actually experiencing sustained transformation and not, oh, ketamine, I tried that, but holy shit, ketamine changed my life.
And the client, I was able to change my life because when it's their own ownership of this new model, this new approach, this new investment strategy, it's now tangible to them. They're building their new yellow brick road and they're walking on it. And what I always say is like we're helping them build their own new fishing rod and practice using it, feeling improvement from that model. And then they're able to sustain themselves, feed themselves long term. And we're there, if someone wants to come in intermittently for a maintenance visit, just as a support, a tool of self care, then that's wonderful as well. That's normal. There's no downside to that. And but this is now their journey, and they feel empowered and actually functionally capable of being able to walk that different path for themselves. And really, that's, I think ethically what a good doctor or healer is supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be helping them feel more self-sufficient while always being there to support them.
Absolutely. Dr. Austin Harris, this has been a true delight. I
Likewise.
am so grateful for you sharing your medicine both with us here on the podcast and also out in the world. What a stance for true lasting change and transformation at a time in the world right now where we really need it. So thank
We
you for
really
the work
do.
you're doing.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I'm extremely grateful, and I'd like to also express that I talk with a lot of people, and it's also rare on my end that someone really has that grasp, that spirit, and both the intellectual and the experiential, and just really the heartfelt background that you're able to express. So we're like talking on the same wavelength. It's really a pleasure.
It's absolutely amen to that. We'll have all of your links down in the show notes. I'm starting to become a real advocate for ketamine tourism, where people go and visit because that not everyone has
We
access to this
actually
kind of
have
care.
programs for that. Our
Oh,
patient
great!
care coordinators. I mean, we've treated clients from 5 continents now,
Wow,
and yeah, they will actually travel. They will actually get visas to receive care with NeuroRelief, and we help them to arrange. All right, where can they stay? How do they are going to be able to transport and sort of help people get what's possible for them. And also one of the big things we're trying to advocate for is insurance coverage, right? Because we know that the powers of be really hate what we're doing because it's a cheap generic molecule. They can't make any money buying and selling. So but we still have a robust super bill program for PPO insurances. We have 2 different interest-free financing programs ranging from 6 to 15 months. So we're doing everything we possibly can to try to make the right care, right? The real optimal care opportunity available to as many people as possible because I understand that for most folks this is a mostly out of pocket cost. And my goal is to bring that down somehow, some way. And so I would just encourage people to give us a call or submit information. We will get in touch with you. We will try to work with you to make this possible for you.
perfect. We'll have all of that linked in the show notes. Thank you so much for being on Ketamine Connections here
Thank
today.
you, Anna. Have a great one.
You too. Thank you so much for tuning into Ketamine Connections with me today. If this episode supported you, the best way to say thank you is by sharing it or leaving a review. And if you're enjoying the show and you want to connect more, I would love to see you on my newsletter. That is where I share behind the scenes insights, thoughtful guidance, and other parts of your ketamine journey. Never spam, always fun. And honestly, since getting kicked off of social media in 2024, it's where I share the real stuff. I share stories, tools, updates that I don't post anywhere else. So sign up at any of the links in the show notes and you'll be the first to know when I'm hosting live Q&A or when I'm doing other fun things that are not available anywhere else. It's the best place to hear about it, stay connected, and grow together. All right, that is all I have for today. Thank you. Stay curious, and I'll see you next time.